Hi.
Howdy.
Hey,
Hey
how's it
there.
going? Hey, how are y'all?
How are you?
Awesome.
Fantastic. How you doing?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Yeah, really good. It's cold as fuck.
Yep.
It's -6 here. You guys are in upstate New York or something?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
where I am. Yep.
Yeah, same shit, different region. Yeah.
Where are you at now?
Des Moines, Iowa. Yeah, I've been here since 2007.
Gotcha.
Not all the time, but most of the time. It's good to see that you guys have good heat in your homes, judging by your outfits. Yeah, because I mean, our heat works pretty well, but I go in and out a lot. I have a corgi. He kind of like controls the action around here.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. He'll be down. Yeah. You'll see him for the night's out.
Awesome.
Yeah. So what's the game plan?
Should we do introductions first?
Yeah.
All right.
You want to do are we going to do like click start? Like
For the interview, you mean?
Yeah. So this is just like all. I mean, let me know.
I think they're recording everything. I think it's all in right now.
Okay, and your name is Javan.
Javan.
Javan, yeah.
Yep.
And we've got Sam, Javan, Evan, and Matthew. Yeah. Basically, we have 5 dudes with glasses.
We were just discussing that.
Yeah, I mean, I can go glasses free.
Mix it up a little, yeah.
Yeah. I got these frames. They're decent. I've had them for several years. I haven't had an eye test in a long time, but I can see all of you guys. So
What else do you need?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You guys are pretty good looking.
Oh shit.
Oh, you just made my year.
Yeah. You look like you're about 25 years old, Matthew.
Oh, I'm 22. People usually think I'm younger.
Really? Are you really 22?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And what about you, Javan?
I'm 26.
And Sam?
28.
And Evan? You're the oldest, aren't you, Evan?
I'm 24.
Oh, okay. Well, you're the most mature. I'm 53. I'll be 54 in August.
You don't look a day over 30, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah. It's all the good, clean living, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As they say in the drinker's business.
So we were also discussing before you started, how do you pronounce your last name? We could not find the correct pronunciation.
Let's have each of you take a crack at it. We'll start with my mouse. We'll start with Matt.
Nastanovich.
Okay, and then Evan.
Nastanovich.
Sam.
Nastanovich.
Javan.
I was gonna go with Nastanovich as well.
Nastanovich is correct.
Nastanovich.
Nice.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Although my mother sometimes says Nastanovich, but anyways, the son of a bitch. I've been called all kinds of things in my life, so you guys do a lot better than people calling roll in 3rd grade in Richmond, Virginia. So
I feel that with my name too.
Are you a Levey or a Levey?
Levey.
But Javan, they always get that wrong.
Javan.
Right?
Yep,
Yeah.
I get Javan, everything in between.
I thought it was Javan.
If you were better at basketball, they'd call you Javan. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of a kick-ass name. Like if you were a basketball player, it'd be give the ball to Javan.
My roommate, when I moved into college freshman year, thought I was going to be black. He was very disappointed.
I imagine so.
When the whitest person on earth walked in.
Yeah. Well, I can feel his pain. Obviously, nobody's ever expected that of me with my name. Or Sam Stahl. Oh, no. Sam Stahl, who knows?
Yeah.
Well, none of us could ever be thought of as Hispanic in advance. But
That's true.
so at least we all speak English. sort of. As best we can. So you guys in school over there?
Graduated.
Yep.
I think we're all graduated.
Grad school
Congratulations. Yeah.
for many years.
Well, that's the way it goes, isn't it? And you're in what town? Western New York, right?
I'm in Canandaigua.
Oh yeah, Finger Lakes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm from Lockport.
There you go. See, I was born in Rochester. My mother grew up near Watkins Glen and Montour Falls. And I still have quite a bit of family in Rochester. Actually, was the first home I ever lived in was in Livonia. You guys familiar with that? Then I was in Pittsburgh.
Yep. I grew up in Mount Morris, which is pretty close to there.
Yeah, my mother went to Cortland State. My dad went to Colgate. So there you go. All you guys have living parents?
Yep.
Fortunately, yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, my father, he died in 2011 at the age of 74. So it was a pretty good go, really. So, he had an interesting life. He was in the Carter White House, my dad.
Wow, really?
Wow.
Yeah, he was actually he was the deputy assistant to Carter in the Office of Public Liaisons. He was on the White House staff from 77 to 80. And he got the job because his boss at Rochester Telephone was a really amazing woman named Midge Costanza, who was the first openly gay person to serve as a assistant to the president. And her job was quite difficult. So she called to my dad, who was a young man at the time, to help her out with that. And then subsequently she resigned and excuse me, it would have been like, I believe 1978. My father is actually responsible for planning and setting up the first ever gay rights meeting in the White House.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he's who's who in America for that. And I'm a junior, so that's a lot to live up to. So, and he's actually the only member of my family. I have a sister and a mother. The only member of my family who can sing really well. And he was a good athlete as well. He played college football. He played against Jim Brown 4 times, which he described as a very arduous task. But anyways, enough about the old man. God bless him, number 88. Yeah. Bob Sr., in fact. Let's see here. I have a photo of him over there. Anyways, that's beside the point. Yeah. That's nice to have the opportunity to brag on my father.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sounds like a cool dude.
Yeah, he was amazing. Yeah, he was cool. He was like, he grew up in Metuchen, New Jersey, and he was like that classic, like late 50s guy, like Sock Hops and like Bill Haley and the Comets. And do you guys ever watch Happy Days?
Oh, yeah.
With Bonds and shit. Yeah, he was one of those kind of guys, He was cool. He was like a jock. Smart one, but same time like a total athlete.
How do you feel about you being a musician?
Oh, he's thrilled with it. I think he came to, he was kind of like Pavement's dad in a lot of ways. Like he was a fixture at all of our shows. He probably came to at least a dozen, including one in Tampa. He was quite famous when Gary was in the band in the early days of buying a cocktail for himself and Gary, and then walking up to the stage during the show and belting down a cocktail with Gary on stage, but he'd always be in the front row. He knew all the songs. His favorite Pavement song was Fillmore Jive. He was just amazed by the fact that, whether it be Steve West, who he'd known forever, and just in general that his son was in a band that people cared about. It kind of blew his mind as much as it blew mine or my mother's, really, to be honest, because I grew up a tennis player. I listened to music since I was 12, 13 years old on a heavy basis, but I always anticipated being in the crowd. I never anticipated being on stage. I'm more suited to being a roadie than being in a band, really, or a tour manager. So I've done plenty of that. So
that actually kind of relates to one of the questions I had, which was if you could like describe what events led to you being in the band, because I think you came in on the second album. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean,
second Javan album.
I was a part of the first live shows we ever played were in the summer of 1990. So that would have been well before Slanted and Enchanted. I think that we had just released Demolition Plot J7, our second 7-inch and our first on Drag City. And we decided to do like 7 or 8 shows on the East Coast. And I was meant to be the driver and tour manager. And I'd never met Gary before. And we were trying to figure out how we were going to do it live, or Steve and Scott were. And so we went to Mamaroneck, New York, where Gary lived, to his parents' house. And we practiced for a couple of days. And before I went up there, Steven said, is there any way you can buy like a floor tom and a snare? Because we'll need somebody to keep time. And I'm like, well, what about Gary? You know, he's a pretty amazing drummer. And he said, just as backup for Gary. And then, so Gary was very skeptical of me from the start, because he thought that I was some guy that was trying to take his job as a drummer. And he's sort of, he's a lovely guy, but he had his fair share of delusion and paranoia. I mean, he's still alive, which I'm sure he still does. So I played every Pavement live show, but then the way the records were made, let's see, we got obviously the first one, Sleigh Tracks and Demolition Plot, and then Perfect Sound Forever, and then Slanted. And so those were all made in Stockton, and I'd never been there. We did brief tours. We took time off from our jobs, and we did brief tours in 90 and 91. 91 is when we had a friend named Rob Chamberlain who played guitar on the first tour, and then in the intervening year, we hired Mark Eibold to play bass. Hired, I mean, I guess that's what you'd call it, hired. And so he started in 91. And then Mark and myself, our debut on a record occurred on Watery Domestic, and the recording of that in 93, which also would have coincided with or 92, which would have coincided with our first ever visit to Stockton. So, yeah, so basically and I didn't really do much at all on Crooked Rain. I played some on Watery Domestic, and then the Give It a Day 7-inch. That's just myself, Steve West, and Steve Malkmus. And then Wowie Zowie's All of Us, and Bright in the Corners All of Us, and Terror Twilight's All of Us, although really it was sort of, the emphasis was on Steven for, sorry, I'm a cough drop addict, on Terror Twilight. So yeah, I mean, I played on the records, but I was never really entirely vital in the studio. I think for the most part, I would always have a track rolling on what I was doing. And then during the mixing phase, which I'd never participated in, they would just decide whether or not to use what I was doing in the mix. And I was actually quite amazed how often what I played actually got used. So it's amazing. Like a lot of things that I'm best known for in Pavement, which would be mostly the screaming parts live. I don't do those on the records. The reason why I did those live was because if Steven did them, then he wouldn't be able to sing real pretty on Father to Sister of Thought or New York Wilder or whatever. He would have shredded his vocal cords. So whether it be Debris Slide or Unfair or Condo for Sale or anything that requires any kind of screaming, any of the early stuff, I would sort of assume those roles in the live show. And I sort of cared more about the live show. I never felt entirely comfortable in a recording studio or even the Silver Jews material. But I mean, it was very fortunate that most of the places we recorded were pretty relaxing. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting really, the way the records were made, although all were sort of different, it's, you know, whether Gary or Steve West was the drummer, you know, you lay down the drum tracks and then Eibel, you know, would play the bass, but Malkmus really, he's primarily responsible for about 50% at least of what's on the Pavement records. The live Animal was a completely different beast. And that's where we were able to sort of like more actively participate, the rest of us. Because Malkmus wrote like 95% of the songs, you know. And
so would he come into the studios with them pretty much fully formed in his head, and then that's kind of how the recording process would go, is making that come out?
Not fully formed, but 80%.
Okay.
And in some cases, he'd have to like teach Mark and Scott their parts in a way, and then they would get to tweak them. And from Crooked Rain forward, Steve West and him, they both lived in Brooklyn at the time, and they spent a lot of time together fleshing out the songs. And then the early stuff in Stockton, it was really Steve and Scott, and then Gary would just, he's a great drummer, so he would play drums. But, you know, in a band like ours that never practiced on any routine schedule, and a lot of the time lived in 5 different places, the recording things were kind of project-y. Wowie Zowie is sort of the most unique in that when we entered the studio in Memphis to make that record, the bulk of that material was pretty well defined, sort of like a typical band that had like 20 songs that were sort of like 80-90% complete and just needed to be like kind of completed and fleshed out in a studio that we were all familiar with easily in Memphis, which is a great studio. So that would be in a funny way, like even though it's sort of the most atypical Pavement record or the strangest or whatever, that would be the one that had sort of the most traditional approach in terms of what went into it. Because we had we'd played all of those songs. We played so much in 94 after Crooked Rain. We played so many gigs, a couple hundred in 94, that we kind of made up a lot of songs while we were on tour in sound check. And like, you know, we were the kind of band that we weren't afraid to like play songs that were 70% finished that weren't even named. I mean, I remember I'd put songs on the set list. I always made the set list for the live show, or most of the time. And we'd have songs on the set list but we had one song that became a Pavement song that was called like Sebadoh, and one that was called Stereo Lab. You know, because those are bands that we toured with that influenced what we were doing. So we kind of like ended up like making songs that sounded like that. I mean, obviously like Pavement has songs that sound like early Sonic Youth as well. and early fall, and that kind of thing. So Echo and the Bunnymen, REM, I mean, where influences are quite clear, really. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Add on to with my next question. So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you're obviously from the Rochester area, but then you did move to Virginia, and you had more of you were just saying that you had more to do with the live shows as opposed to the recording. But I was curious, upstate New York in general has a pretty interesting history with a lot of 90s bands, and it comes to like certain members, like Tim Gordon's from Rochester. You had the 10,000 Maniacs from.
Love them. I saw them many times in the 80s.
I was curious.
Huge fan. I was a huge fan.
My dad absolutely loves them. I listened to them a lot.
How old is he?
He's gonna be 54 in December.
Yeah, see, they were like, it's interesting because, well, Natalie Merchant was a law unto herself, and I can't remember the guitar player's band, but he was fantastic. I mean, it was an amazing band, and like, because of MTV and the way things worked, like, they sort of gained notoriety and became famous for a cover of Peace Train. And I mean, 10,000 Maniacs before that had done 80 amazing original songs. So yeah, anyways.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna. I was wondering if, like, with you being from upstate at one point in your life, do you think that influenced how artistically you put any sort of input when it comes to Pavement or any other acts you've been in?
No. Other than, like, I have family up there, so, like, I think just about everything you do in life is sort of impacted by where you've lived and where you've been. But growing up in Richmond, and then going to school in Charlottesville would have had a far bigger impact. I started getting really into buying records and pretending I was cool because I listened to what I thought was cool music in about 81, and that was all because I lived in Richmond. And I was blessed in Richmond that we had really sort of intriguing bands that would come through there and play at a half dozen different small venues and do a lot of matinee shows. We had a great record store. So I'd say, like, my teenage years in Richmond, I went to high school with a lot of really great people. My dear friend, the late Nordy Horde, we got into music together. We actually had a college radio show when we were teenagers at University of Richmond. And then Steve West, who was one of my best friends since ninth grade, he and his friends, Hanby Carter and Rob Williams, who makes solo records, and John Smith, they had bands since they were like 13 or 14. So I would say that I never really, I felt like I became really enthusiastic about music when I was, ninth grade. I've got a sister that's 2 years older, so she's pretty cool. Like, she was listening to the Pretenders and the Police and U2 and stuff like that. And my father, my father was into me. Like, I'm not saying I didn't grow up in a household without music, but there's no musicians in my family, sort of thing. So I think really, like, any background that I have in music, like, is the combo of, like, Richmond and then Charlottesville, and then taking a myriad of road trips to see bands all up and down the East Coast. DC was important, going there. New York and Hoboken, going to Athens, basically being really irresponsible in college and blowing off classes and going to see bands was really sort of huge. And college radio was huge. I think college radio is sort of like something that it made a lot of us feel really, really cool when we were like 18, 19, 20 years old. And, you know, WTJU in Charlottesville at the time, like David Berman had a radio show, Malkmus had a radio show, James McNew from Yola Tango had a show, John Beers from Happy Flowers, Gate Pratt. There's a lot. Rob Chamberlain, who was in the first live incarnation of Pavement and also in a band called Nice Strong Arm, had a show. Steve Keen, the artist, and his wife Star. Steve Keen did the cover art for Wowie Zowie. They had a great radio show. So like there was like a lot of people there that, and we were kind of competitive about our radio shows. I think it really sort of like Ken Ganfield, Carl Young runs a really good label in North Carolina called Ally Records. He's really into like New Zealand music. Eric Weiland, who's like a professor in Missouri. So I mean, there was like a lot of Tom Frank, who's a really famous author. There's a lot of really sort of like interesting people at radio shows there in the mid 80s. And Jack McHale, who still does a show in Richmond. It was just like, it kind of pushed the envelope for all of us and made us kind of listen to Maynard Sype, who booked all the bands. I mean, Aaron Margosis, God, they're all coming back to me. David Wellbeloved. There was all these like really sort of Brenda Dunlap, who like for at least a decade designed all the costumes for David Byrne. There was just a lot of really uniquely talented people there in the mid 80s, which was sort of weird. And then of course I had the experience of having a college radio show as a high school student. So I think that sort of like gave me like a huge edge in terms of access and exposure to music in the pre-internet era. When you're talking about good college radio stations with like a, you know, sort of a massive vinyl library and like a lot of people that would bring in their own stuff. And I was the station manager for a couple of years, and I kind of irresponsibly created like a party atmosphere, because when I became a DJ, the emphasis was more on what you played more than like how you executed your radio show. And then we had this guy come in, I think when I was fourth year in college, that was kind of a prick that wanted us to sort of clean up our snap, crackles, and pops. I mean, there'd be people that would like pass out during their radio show at like 3:30 in the morning. And,
Amazing.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of, there was zero sex in there because, you know, AIDS was a scare, but there was a lot of misbehavior in general. It was wild. So who knows? But yeah, no, it was an amazing time to be there, and Richmond's a great rock and roll town. So yeah, to answer your question, like upstate New York, and my connections to it, and New York State in general, like it was just for me like a very pleasant place to be a kid. But you know, I've just visited since I was a young man. Sorry about the incredibly run around answer to that question.
I'm loving it. This is, I mean, thank you even for coming and talking to us.
Yeah.
We appreciate
No,
it.
my pleasure, man. No, yeah, no problem, Evan, man. Yeah, my pleasure, man. In fact, the Doors, it's cool to see your Doors t-shirt. Like Steve West, when he was in ninth grade, he was so obsessed with the Doors that he would stay after school and draw that lettering, that sort of unique Doors lettering on the chalkboard. And he was an artist. He became a sculptor. He went to VCU art school. And he was obsessed with Jim Morrison and the Doors. And the first live show Steve West ever played was at my sister's 16th birthday party. And the last three songs were him doing Doors covers where he's just doing like a really sort of blatant, like 6 on a scale of 1 to 10 Jim Morrison imitation. It's funny to bring back memories of it, but like I can't really think about the Doors without thinking about Steve West at 15 trying to be Jim Morrison. But I remember seeing in Richmond, there's a big river, a historic river that runs through the city called the James. And one summer we had these incredibly horrible droughts. I was like 17. And a dear friend of mine, Jay Tobler, who, the late Jay Tobler, who was actually wrote, like, did any of you study art history in school or take art history classes?
No.
If you would have taken American art, then like Jay, like would have, I think he wrote like the most widely used textbook on American art before he died of leukemia and is around 30. But anyways, we were catfishing in the James River because like the river had these sort of massive boulders in it. There'd be these puddles between the boulders and these catfish that were like, 6, 7, 8 pounds would just be like kind of swimming in these puddles, and it was pitch black out there. And the river is massive. It's really wide, and it's the kind of thing your parents wouldn't want you to do. Okay, so so we'd climb across all these rocks, and then we would just sit there, and you could cast basically any kind of bait into this giant dark puddle that you couldn't see. And then you'd sit there and shoot the shit. And like after a few minutes, your rod would just like slowly get dragged across the rock. And then you'd grab your rod and you'd like reel in like a really large catfish. And like, so we were doing this between like midnight and 2 a.m. And we were just having an amazing time. And then Jay at the time had a car that I think he'd bought for $800. It was like an old, just kind of shitty sedan from like the early 70s. One of those cars where if you got in an accident with it, you would lose, like, because the steel was so thick, And we heard a car playing roadside blues really, really loudly. Okay, pull up. And then we heard all this smashing of windows, and we ran across the rocks and we watched this other car peel out, and they'd smashed all the windows of Jay's car and stolen everything out of it, including his cassette collection and everything. And the worst thing is that my parents were visiting Europe at the time, and for some reason, that day I went to their house and I grabbed all of the family's mail, like 3 weeks worth of mail that was in a basket, just because I wanted to go through it and see if there's anything for me. And they ended up stealing this basket of mail, which contained like all of my father's like bills and all kinds of other valuable pieces of mail that I never really recovered, which I got in a huge amount of trouble for. So therefore, I've always had a very, very, very difficult time listening to the Doors since then. I was traumatized by that, especially Roadhouse. Isn't that the name of the song? Going
Roadhouse
to the road.
Blues, right?
Yeah, Roadhouse Blues. Yeah. If I hear that, and I like kind of shudder. It's one of the only songs that I can't listen to. I mean, I guess there are more than that. Obviously, there's a lot of songs that are completely unlistenable. A lot of shit that comes out today, but say Levey. Yeah. What do you guys think of like I just saw, like, I obviously don't really pay much attention, but a lot of people are making a bit of a stink about Phoebe Bridgers smashing her guitar. I saw the video of that. I mean, like, good for her,
Yeah.
She's winning, like, she ticks all the boxes on the 2021 recipe, let her have her 3 to 6 months in the sun, and hopefully she can sort of carry on. But it is funny how there's been a certain amount of backlash to that I'm semi-aware of.
Yeah, like David Crosby.
Yeah.
Crosby still isn't there. Is freaking out about her on Twitter all the time now.
Little bits.
She called him a little bitch.
Oh, David Crosby, is that the one with the ponytail?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on some show with Malcolmus a couple of years ago, and Malcolmus knows who he is, like whatever, knows a lot about him because Malcolmus is like a total music historian, and he didn't know who the fuck Malcolmus was, and he kind of said it. He's like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is. You know what I mean? Like, it was funny. I think you can find it. I think I found it on YouTube like a year ago. It was kind of funny. He's just a miserable old shit. He should be extremely happy that, like, you know, his mediocrity has been paid for. I mean, like, you know, I just don't understand why people, you know, can't be grateful. I mean, like, if you've made a penny in the music business, you've done, it's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
I mean, my lord. So, anyways.
To segue into my next question, I want to go back to the upstate New York and kind of away from the music. This is kind of a stupid question, but as a Rochester native, where's the best garbage plate?
The best garbage plate?
Yeah.
I haven't been to Rochester in a long time. I remember there was a place called the Burgundy Basin Inn.
Okay.
They had that old-fashioned game where you could sort of, there was like bowling pins that were like on the roof, and you'd slide a puck underneath them. Do you guys ever play that?
Oh yeah, as the little tabs like underneath them.
Yeah. They had that. I was sort of intrigued by that. They were, Rochester to me when I was a young kid was really most famous for those white sausages, White Hots.
Oh yeah.
Those Weigels.
Yeah. And then, you know, there's always a bit of like Genesee cream ale about. That kind of things that would give you headaches. But I grew up across the street from these three potheads called the Walker Brothers. And I'm sure they were just into like Creedence and like, you know, the kind of kids that like were 10 years older than me that went to Woodstock and stuff. And like, they were just kind of like potheads, and like they would paint the street and they would try to like steal your pumpkins and stuff like that. And so, you know, when you're young, you're scared of kids like that, you know. Gary Young was one of those kids. Like, he was the kind of kid that like really enjoyed scaring children. And I think I was raised differently. I'm probably quite a bit nicer than that, you know, to be frank. You know, I mean, you know, it was a different time, you know, like, you know, it's interesting to think about because I don't really ever think about it too much, but because, you know, life goes in like these 3 to 6 month segments, and we're not even going to talk about the pandemic really and how that changes things, or we could if you want, but you know, you don't really, I'm not the kind of person that notices like big sociological changes too much. It's interesting, the word that sort of has entered our language most in the last 60 to 90 days is this cancel culture. I guess that's, you know, I mean, quite frankly, if you're on the wrong end of cancel culture, then you probably did something that deserved it. Although I've seen certain cases, like we have a guy here in our town, Des Moines, which is actually a city. It's like 250,000 people. But it's a really small scene. One thing that you need to know about Des Moines, it's like probably the biggest city in America that nothing significant musically has ever come from here. I mean, what the city is most famous for in terms of rock is Slipknot, that diabolical metal band. And but in reality, like I think only 2 members of the band are from Des Moines. It's like a total LA band with 2 Des Moines guys in it. That doesn't really count, you know. Mm-hmm. So if you think about it, like, you know, think about Athens, which is a city of like 60,000 people, and they've got 50 great bands that have come from Athens. It's just like, it just blows my mind in Des Moines. Like they act like they have a music scene when, like, we're talking 2021 now, and like very few things. Like, I mean, I'm not saying there's not been any good music from here. It's just no music that you would have heard. Do you know what I mean? Because like, fuck, I mean, there's like a half dozen good bands from Boise or something, So. What's going on musically over there?
A lot of pop punk bands, I'd say, if you're from like the Buffalo area, and you get some like hip hop going on. I'm not really a big fan of the scene around here personally, but if somebody wants to like interject and say you're wrong.
My dad has a band that I think is good, but
you have a band?
No, my dad does. Tom Stahl and the Dangerfields. But they're not. I don't know if they're part of the scene per se. They play around, but.
Are they like? Do they do covers? They play originals.
Originals, yeah. My dad does like a singer-songwriter type thing. He plays out solo a lot, and then in the summers I'm in it. I play guitar in it sometimes.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
What would you say the influences are?
Dylan, Beatles, Tom Petty, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Just like good, solid rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's good. And like, so when you feel like you play a good show, like you're kind of delivering the goods or whatever to, the scene. Although I guess you haven't played live in a long time.
Yeah, I think the last one, we played one sometime it was like September or August. We played, there's this place in Buffalo called Sportsman's Tavern on kind of the west side. That's kind of a cool spot. But it was dead. Like they hardly let anybody in because of all the food restrictions and stuff as far as bars. But it was fun to play.
Yeah. So the biggest band ever from like Buffalo is not Goo Goo Dolls.
Yeah. They play them 24/7 around here.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think about it, like and again, I'm not familiar with their entire catalog, but a lot of the things they did were pretty meritorious. Like, I mean, I guess really sort of the most off-putting thing about Goo Goo Dolls was the band name. I mean, like, and then they just became like this like industry thing. Just like a lot of bands, like, I mean, Soul Asylum you can sort of throw in a similar category of bands that like were really sort of cut out to be good, but then like being huge was sort of like kind of thrust upon them. So they actually made a pretty natural adjustment from being like a local indie band to being like a major label thing. And that's sort of held against them, even though they actually pulled it off. I mean, like, they were like a kind of a big late MTV band. There are far more embarrassing things to sort of define a city from a rock perspective.
Yeah, I think it's just like the repetitiveness for me, where it's like you can't really escape that kind of sound. Which I'm not saying it's bad. I think it's just when you constantly hear the same thing.
And then you get people coming to our college that love them that aren't from Buffalo, and they're like, "Oh, Goo Goo Dolls from Buffalo," and then it's just repeat. I mean, the band members are nice. They're nice guys.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's nice that they're nice. I mean, like, no, I think, it's not their fault. It's not their fault that they're overplayed because there's been a void that hasn't been filled. I mean, somebody should just go out there and be better than Goo Goo Dolls, I suppose.
Do you think?
I mean, like, keep in mind in Charlottesville, like, I was there during a time where there was, like, as I mentioned before, a lot of really interesting people, but obviously a band that turned out to be far bigger than Goo Goo Dolls rose from the ashes of that same era, and it was fucking Dave Matthews Band. I mean, Boyd Tinsley, who plays violin for Dave Matthews Band, he used to play at this little bar like 150 yards from my house on like Thursday night, and he would play with one or two musicians, and it was, you'd only hear it when you walk by, but he would play violin and make these sort of kind of embarrassing songs, and like we would like be like, "Oh, weird, Boyd Tinsley. Oh, look, there's like 8 people in there." Like, I mean, Boyd got the last laugh. But yeah, I mean, that's the way it goes. I mean, popularity is just so hard to figure out. Um, it you know, and even harder to figure out these days with the way it works with the streaming and the internet and the YouTube. I mean, there's like at least 3,000 artists that are kind of YouTube only that have never really put out a record that have been listened to far more than anything I was associated with. You know, I mean, there's like people that make like $50 million like playing video games on YouTube, and people watch them play video games. That sort of blows my mind.
Same.
I mean, I got these nephews. I've got one nephew who's 15, one that's 21, and one that's 25. And I went home for Christmas like 3 or 4 years ago, and that's what one of them was doing. He was watching some Swedish guy play video games. Like, it's like, I know your Uncle Bob's boring, but God, what could be more boring than that? What are you gonna do?
Dang kids.
Yeah, well, hell, you guys are them.
I have a question that kind of related to the whole popularity mainstream music idea you were talking about. I was wondering, with Pavement, was there ever kind of like a temptation or a push from any direction to go mainstream from where you were in popularity? Because it seems that like there was always kind of like more of a independent, do your own thing. Like you never like tried to dress up like rock stars or anything.
No, we dress like you, actually. I think that Matador and Bot, Dave Viacelli from Billions Corporation, our booking agents to start, and even MTV, like especially sort of the alternative branch of MTV. I think they would have liked, certainly a lot of the places that booked us, I think they would have liked to have had more commercially accessible material come out. So, but no, in terms of pressure, we were very fortunate that all of the people that we worked with, whether it be Drag City or Matador or Domino or Big Cat or the label in Japan or Fellaheen, they were just always kind of like pretty satisfied with what we did. And of course, the way it works is that you finish your record and then you send it to the record company, and then they just have to kind of like deal with it. And if it's like really, really shitty, they can reject it. And I'm sure during those times in which Chris, Gerard, and Patrick, for example, would have gotten Wowie Zowie at Matador, there was probably a little bit of a crisis there in terms of its marketability versus Crooked Rain, which obviously opened up sort of a different audience than we'd ever been associated with. But yeah, in terms of the band, there was no real consciousness of wanting to be any bigger than we actually were. I mean, I think it really the opposite. Really, I think that we were always sort of like pleasantly surprised and very comfortable with the level of fame that we had to deal with. It was actually pretty hard grafts. I mean, we toured a lot and we were pretty tight budgeted on crew. We just had a sound man, guitar tech. I remember like the first time we had like a lighting designer. We never had a monitor engineer until 2010. We had a merch person usually. And then I don't think it was until 97 that we started traveling around in buses. And that was probably for safety reasons more than anything else. So yeah, I mean, no, I think it was just like, I think that we were just, you got to keep in mind we're a band that played on Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien, and in 2010 on Fallon and Colbert, and we played on MTV 120 minutes, and like, our videos would get shown on there late at night, and we played like K-Rock Weenie Roast and like, obviously Lollapalooza. And so we got invited to do like a lot of things that bands like us on labels like ours, like, didn't do. It's like you think of Matador, like they had Liz Phair, Cat Power, Guided by Voices, John Spencer Blues Explosion, Teenage Fan Club, Yola Tango. And so we sort of fit in with that lot. And like the publicist, the late Spencer Gates, that we worked with through like 97, she was terrific. And Deb Ward, like, we just kind of like aligned ourselves with people that were sort of the same age with the same taste that had the same interests. So it's not like we were dealing with some like this weird like kind of Buddha-like prick in LA. He was like 63 that like hated the way we sounded and wanted us to sound different, that like said I can't release this shit or anything like that. I mean, I guess Wowie's Owie would be like sort of the biggest curveball that we threw in terms of the industry, but that's just what we were doing at the time. So no, I think the main thing is that we never really felt like we were failing. We felt like we were doing really, really well, and that we were sort of comfortable with our exposure and our success. We have to keep in mind with Pavement too that we were a lot, for lack of a better word, we were a lot bigger in the UK and Europe than we were in here. We were more of a household name in the UK. People cared about us a lot in Germany and France and Holland, and to an extent Spain and Scandinavia, and we had a good following in Australia, and really good following in New Zealand, and Japan. So being international was a priority because, what a fantastic experience that was, instead of having to tour the States over and over again. So there, there's less money to be made there with like international artist tax and like the expense of traveling and da 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 da. But like at the same time, like, we made less of an impact on our own country than we really did sort of anywhere else during the time that we existed, which is fine. I mean, I think the UK, I think the English, like they sort of like, and the Scottish and the Welsh, even the Northern Irish, we played in Belfast. They sort of really embrace us because of our obvious influences from the 70s and 80s in the UK. Whether it be The Fall or Echo and the Bunnymen or, New Order or whatever. And the fact that we were called Pavement. I mean, that's what they call the sidewalk there. So I think they sort of, we were just like, I remember the first time we played in England, we were playing kind of at a club, like sort of in the middle of nowhere in Derby in the middle part of the country. And, we'd played 60, 70 shows at that point. We'd played a lot on St. and we'd already toured the States, definitely one full time. And we we went up on stage. I think we started with Summer Babe, and there was like, first of all, we showed up there at this club, and there's like 50 people outside. It was like kids that just like wanted our autographs and stuff. We played like Summer Babe, and like the rule after we played Summer Babe, I'll never forget as long as as long as I live, because it was like nothing I'd ever heard before. Like you'd play Box Elder or something, and there'd be like a spattering of applause, but like we were just embraced there and sort of in a special way, and I mean, kind of treated really well, would it be because of John Peel, who loved the band, or Reading Festival and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that I don't really feel like a big deal anywhere in the world, but like I would say I'd be more likely to be recognized in England than anywhere else. Or just like the normal person has heard of Pavement in the UK, unlike here. I mean, you've got to be like, pretty much like a music fan or underground music fan, or you got to dig pretty deep to be a Pavement fan here. But like, I think just like just normal people who listen to music have heard of Pavement in England, so yeah, no, I never felt, I think we always felt like we delivered.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have like a favorite performance with Pavement that stands out in your memory?
And there's a handful of times where we would play, and now keep in mind we failed a lot, and and I remember sort of like as the band went on, we sort of got more proficient and felt like we were getting more professional, but we were always sort of behind the eight ball. Like it was always sort of a challenge because Malkmus did kind of like to mess with us and mess with tempos and sort of keep us off guard, I think just to entertain himself. There was we would play this club outside of Copenhagen all the time that was like 6 or 7 years old. It was called the Lopen Club, Loppen, and we played there 3 or 4 times, and like the ceiling is like about as high as this ceiling. It's like like they had this, you'd put your gear on these crates and they'd pull it up with pulleys, and the place held like 400 people, and it was sort of a beautiful bar and it had these really low ceilings, and it sounded amazing in there. And like every time we played there, it just sounded magical. So yeah, that any gig there. I mean, another place, like it's more like certain venues you'd go to. For some reason, Pavement always played really well in Boston, which was really strange because we usually come after New York, which would end up being really stressful. Then you get to Boston, it was like all the stress was off. So I felt like we always played good live shows there. But St. Andrews Hall in Detroit, there were certain venues that were sort of perfect for Pavement, in that they held like 500 people. There'd be 500 people that were really up for it, and it sounded good and made sense. So, and then there'd be other places where there would be places that were really just sort of too big Fillmore was always great in San Francisco. We played there a bunch of times. Legendary club, the Fillmore. And I guess like if in Northern California, since the band was sort of always embraced as a Stockton band where it originated, that the Bay Area has always sort of embraced Pavement. So I think that in the States, New York included, Pavement's a bigger deal like in San Fran than anywhere else. But yeah, Liberty Lunch and all. There's just like certain venues where you remember, 40 Watt in Athens. There's like certain venues where you get there and you're in good hands with the staff and the owner. I mean, 40 Watt in Athens, which is a legendary club that's owned by Velena Vago and Barry Buck. So it's Valena is married to David Lowery from Cracker and Camper Van Beethoven, and Barry Buck was Peter Buck from REM's first wife. And so it's two women who run this amazing rock club. And so you get there and you know you're in really good hands. I mean, even Silver Jews played a good show there. And there's like 700 people, and it's just, you know, everything works, you know, it makes, you know what I mean? So then there are other places that you go over and over again where you see it on the schedule and you're like, oh, fuck. That are just too big or too echoey, or like, you know, they kind of hate you, or, you know, you work with a lot. Keep in mind too that Pavement, you know, we'd show up with our gear that was always kind of shitty and like in some cases broken, and we weren't pro rock at all. I mean, you think about it, like, you know, we would, like, Soundgarden would play on a Tuesday night and Pavement would be on the Wednesday night, and Soundgarden had like, they had like a tech that just tuned the snares of the fucking drummer. I mean, like, they were just like so pro rock. And we weren't, and we were really shabby, and like we'd have like a shitty van and we'd show up with our gear. And so it's just like when you go into a music store and you've got to buy like strings or sticks, and there's like an ornery sort of miserable dickhead who's in like a shitty band that like hates all musicians that go in there. It's the same way like when you show up at like the Masquerade in Atlanta, where like the guy who's doing monitors is going to brag about like, you know, fucking two of the girls in the band that played the night before, sort of shit, you know. So like it's just weird how it all works. There's some places that you're just like so happy to show up and play, and that usually translates into a really good gig, and other places where you just don't fit in any way, shape, or form. And I think that amateurishness that we sort of brought to the occasion would sort of work against us, especially in this country on occasion. When we played a lot of places that were just far, we didn't have enough gear. I mean, they were far too big for us to be playing in them. Some places in New York and LA where that held like, even in San Fran, we played the Warfield, it's too big. Like, if it holds 2,500, 3,000 people, then you got to bring in like extra PA or whatever, you know, like, I remember playing one show in Prague and Stereolab was opening for us, and I was real nervous about it. I think it was the second time we'd played there before, but the first time was in a tiny venue, and I was nervous about it because it was kind of big and like there was people there, and Stereolab's like a really well-oiled machine. And I went out in the crowd, and like the PA like would have been sort of appropriate for like a room this size, and there's like 800 people there. So like I realized only like 20 of the 800 people could hear the show, and so I was quickly relieved. I was like, well, it doesn't really matter what we do tonight because nobody's gonna be able to hear it, you know. And then it's like the complete opposite in Japan. Like you go in Japan, you show up and you've got like these four dudes that completely fix. They completely fix. I remember like I had like a Moog Prodigy that I bought for $100. It was worth like $500. I get to Japan, and the guy is like taking it apart, cleaning it, fixing the two keys that had never worked, on the phone with some like expert on Moogs in the US. And like they clean all your stuff. Then you start the show. This is also a hilarious thing about playing Japan. I don't care whether it's Fukuoka, Nagoya, Tokyo, Sapporo, wherever you go. You like I would go out on stage 5 minutes before. That's like me with like 5 set lists to tape them on the monitors, and I'd walk out there with this, just me with like a beer and like 5 pieces of paper with duct tape on them, and like I'd walk out there and like 500 girls would scream, you know. And I'd be like, wow, you know, like it's just a 30-year-old drunk guy from, you know, Louisville It lives in wolves. Whatever. I mean, it was just bizarro world. And then you start the show, and everything's so clean, and everything sounds so amazing that it's disconcerting, and it makes you really self-conscious because you realize how shitty you actually sound. That you've been sort of like hiding behind like dust filled and broken monitors and stuff, where you're like, it's like you know, you're so self-conscious, you're stripped of like the relief, like of, you know, now knowing how off key you are, or how stupid, like in my parts, I always like would try my best to like avoid listening to like playbacks, or like the sound man would make cassettes of our live shows, and like I wouldn't want to listen to it because a lot of the things I really enjoyed doing like really sounded like idiotic, and like everybody would like people like our crew, which consisted of Andy Dimmick, the guitar tech, and Remco, the sound man, and then we had Bobby Bass. They would listen to him just to laugh at what I was doing, you know. So I would do so many corny things to just kind of entertain myself. It was funny, but who knows? Yeah. No, I mean, not. I'm trying to think of one gig in particular that was particularly magical. I would say in 2010, that reunion tour, we played a great show in Milwaukee, and a lot of it had to do with one of those circumstances, like the night before we played Pritzker Pavilion in Chicago, with like, which is a stage that holds like, you know, 60 people. It's meant for like symphonies and shit. And we're like a 5-piece indie rock band playing for like 8,000 people in a field. It was like impossible. You know, you can't, I mean, even like, you know, fucking Sonic Youth couldn't pull that off or something like that, you know. And like, then the next night we're in Milwaukee, and it's a place that holds 1,200, and it's tight and sounds awesome. So yeah, that's kind of like Atlanta that year in 2010. Atlanta was a really good show, and it was an old place that held like 1,500, but like, the crowd makes the shows. I mean, the crowd, like, you know, Pavement fans are fantastic. I mean, they, you know, they tend to sing along, and like in the early days when we'd mess up our songs all the time, it's almost like they were rooting for us, you know, like not to mess up. Like, you don't get, like, usually when you go see a band, like, you don't find yourself doing that. You know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people are just like, oh man, these guys are shit live. You know, I like their records, but they're shitty live. But like, people weren't like that. They were like, they kind of like wanted us to be good. So that helped, you know. And then when we got to a point, like, you know, really 94 sort of changed the band, because we had to play so much that we couldn't. We didn't have an excuse to suck anymore. Okay, so we had to kind of get it together. Because it's sort of like, you know, you take it sort of personally. It's sort of embarrassing to like go up there and play a horrible show, because, you know, back then, of course, people paid like $6, $8, $12, $15 to see a gig. That's a lot of money, and it was hard for me to get my head around in 2010 people paying $40 to see Pavement, but then I'd realize that we were like kind of the cheapest ticket on the entire month or whatever. I mean, fuck, like some people pay $56 to see like Snail Mail or some shit, and that's like the kind of band that would come like in third at like a 9th grade talent show. I mean, you know. I saw them, they were awful, just awful.
I think someone here had a question about your thoughts of modern music. Whoever had that.
Or just like with like alternative rock in general, do you think it's like heading in a better direction, or do you think there's a lot of things it needs to work on?
I think there's so many things going on that you could spend, and I gather that you guys spend a fair amount of your time listening to music, new and old. That you could spend like 6 hours a day for the next 45 days just listening to and making playlists on however you stream your music, and there's no way that you'd cover even like 1/40th of what's out there. So, I mean, I run a little record label here in the house, and it's strictly nonprofit. So I put out the record and I front all the costs, and then usually it's 400 or 500 copies of a record. And then when I've sold a couple of hundred, then I'm repaid, and then all the profits go to the band after that. So, I mean, so I make nothing, and I don't mind. I mean, I sort of enjoy, like, I mean, I love all the bands, so I enjoy people hearing the music. It's Broker's Tip. It's my record label, Broker's Tip Records. Here's our stickers with xylophones on them. And it's just internet only. I have an Instagram page and stuff. Basically, like, people that I think that make really good music, that deserve to have a piece of vinyl, that are either completely dependent on Bandcamp or Spotify or whatever. Of course, in this day and age, without the opportunity to play live for like over a year now, which is going to continue on for the next several months. So it's more vital than ever, but there's just so much that I don't think that really anybody, even people that like work at Secretly Canadian or Jaguar or Domino or Matador or Drag City, nobody has a clue. I mean, I got an email. I do this podcast called 3 Songs Pod, and we've done 150 episodes now. And the premise is that my friend Mike picks 3 songs from any era of any genre, and I pick 3 songs, then we play them and talk about them. Okay. And for a few months, I was really worried about it because, of course, the first 50 episodes were easy because you're just kind of playing, like, you've got 100, 150 bands that you're more than happy to play a song by. But then once you hit that 150 of bands that you've loved for decades, then you're going to kind of run out of material. But that's not the case because, like, I got an email this week from a band in Lisbon, and they're just on Bandcamp, and it's just a gorgeous recording. So there's so many bands all over the place. And of course, I just think it's impossible to gauge, to answer your question. There's no way to gauge. I think that based on, and of course, there's really, especially for your age group, there's really nothing sort of more exciting and enjoyable than seeing like a really great live performance. So I feel badly for like both my nephews and gentlemen your age and ladies who have not seen great live music over the last year, because obviously this is a year out of your life where you would have road tripped and you would have seen at least 6 to 25 good bands, that you dig. So when things start up again, whenever that may be, here's the corgi. Where Ghosty? Oh, let me get him real quick. What's up, Joe? That's Mr. Good.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's Valentine's Day, so his mother put a pink bow tie on him.
Oh,
Yeah, he's a good boy. Yeah,
that's adorable.
Yeah, you're a good boy, guy. Do you have to go bathroom? Yeah. Good. Yeah, Ghost want to get on there. He's moaning. He wants to go to the bathroom.
Oh, I can do it.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I just think it's one of those things that there's just so much out there. I mean, it blows my mind. My wife, she works in a really cool bar that, and there's a good friend of mine that runs a great taco place in New Orleans called Galaxy Taco, and I make their music playlists, and like I have no problem sitting down, and it takes me like 20 minutes to make a 2.5-hour playlist for their places 3 times a month.
Yeah, you're fast.
Because there's just a myriad. There's just so much out there. I mean, like,
Oh my gosh.
there's so much out there, and there's also so much from the last 50 years. I mean, I just think, but yeah, in terms of new, I'd say that just in the last 6 months, I've heard 20 or 30 bands that I really enjoyed, that I'd be more than happy to buy their records, and that I would definitely drive 50 miles at least to see them play live from all over the world. So I'd say that if you dig deep, there's plenty there. What's amazing to me is that whether it be Pitchfork or Stereo Scum, I just made this up. Pitchfork or Pub Sop, or whether it be whatever. I mean, like, what's amazing to me is when you see these critics come out with their year-end polls of the 100 best songs or the 50 best albums, and you flip through them. I mean, I flipped through the Pitchfork one, and I think I'd only heard of like 4 of 100 bands, and then I listened to maybe 10 things or something that I spent like an hour, right? And I just didn't think it was, I mean, whatever. But what's disconcerting to me is that it's all the same shit. It's almost like one guy makes his poll and then they feel like, so what I'm saying is there's a lot more than that. Like, there's a lot more than like what's on those lists. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's shocking in a way. Like, it's shocking to me that like, that, and I'm not saying Billie Eilish doesn't deserve her audience or something like that, but the fact that she's 17 million times bigger than Catherine Ireton blows my mind. Or the fact that people still listen to Elon Musk's horrible girlfriend grind. And I it's just, it's just kind of disconcerting the way it all works, because I think really what it comes down to with the streaming services, from what I can gather, and I've only really used them since I started doing the podcast because it's just more convenient for me to like send the files of the songs I'm going to play to the guy who does it, and like, it's the easiest means to play music in situations like that, is that if you go to a band, somebody says that, hey man, have you heard Bikini Kill? And you're gonna be like, yeah, I've heard a couple songs. So then you're gonna like, oh, I should listen to Bikini Kill more. And you go to the Spotify page and you look at the most listened to songs, and you're just gonna listen to like the 2 that have been listened to the most. And that, a lot of times, I can tell you, for example, the most clear-cut example is the number 1 song of Pavement on Spotify is not even on any record. It's Harness Your Hopes. So that's just a complete byproduct of people just being like, oh, that's got the most listens. Like that's gotten listened to more than Stereo or Range Life or any other, or Cut Your Hair or anything else. So it's just like, the way that works is just like, I don't know. It's just like, I just think you have to put your time in. And then the other thing that's kind of different now is that, college radio is not bad and stuff like that. And you can stream like good college radio stations. Like you can listen to WTG right now, or WFPK in Louisville, or you can listen to it on the internet. As if you're like 5 miles away from the antenna or whatever. But I just think that it's really easy to access music. Bandcamp is amazing, but I mean, the 5 of us could listen to Bandcamp from now until Christmas, and like, there's just so much. I mean, like, I don't know. Back then, like, fanzines, and back in the day, 80s, 90s. Like there's fanzines, and there's also like people that sold records that would review them at the same time. There's this guy, Tim Adams, that ran this thing called Ajax Records, and he'd sell records and write reviews. So he kind of like, just like a lot of the famous rock critics that came before him, he would sort of, and of course, Forced Exposure, and, Gerard had Conflict. I mean, there was like, it's just, there's not people sort of defining things as much that are credible. Like there's no John Peel in the UK. There's the Radio 6 guy who's cool that was in the fall, Mark Riley. It's just, I don't know. You're kind of like on your own. You don't have any guidance. You know what I mean? You don't have like a tastemaker who's like sort of steering you in one direction, which sometimes is a negative because the tastemaker could be really good. Whether it be like somebody who writes for a music magazine or has a radio show or something like that. So yeah, we're just all on our own. We just got to kind of figure it out for ourselves. Because if you buy everything that comes out on Drag City, then like, or listen to everything on Drag City or Matador or whatever, I mean, or any of the other dozens of labels out there, the diversity amongst the artists is going to be insane. And like, it's really hard to sort of pinpoint what you're going to like and what you don't like. I mean, I can tell you that like Circuit to You on Drag City, she's amazing. I mean, that Haley Four's her name. She's amazing. And at least to me, and Bill McKay on Drag City is amazing. But like, I mean, I can personally live without whatever, Will Oldham's doing. Cause like in my opinion, like he's good, but he's basically been doing the same song now for 20 years. Yeah. And I'm sure a lot of people could say the same thing about Malkmus, but I haven't really listened to all of it. Yeah. I thought Traditional Techniques was cool. That was a good album. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, and again, like once you get to be a certain age, like the age you guys are now, like sort of music snobbery drops out of the equation too. You don't sort of like judge others. They listen to shit music. Because everybody has a different set of ears. Like, some of the coolest people you might know might love Phil Collins. Who fucking knows? I mean, it doesn't matter, I mean, like, but when you're in your in your teenage years, in your early 20s, like you just like, you can't really hang with people that like, listen to Avril Lavigne or something. Or like fucking whatever. She's cool, actually. I like Alanis Morissette too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jagged Little Pill. Cough drop. So what are you guys into? Like if you could say like what's the best record you bought in the last or discovered in the last year?
I actually just reviewed one for the website. It's For the First Time by Black Country New Road.
Yeah, see, I've never heard of that. Then you're telling me that in your opinion it's good.
Yes, I bought the vinyl as soon as I listened to it, which rarely.
Yeah, see,
ever
that's
happens.
a big step.
Yeah,
that's a big step.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've done that. I think I've done that 5 times in the last 5 months. So yeah. So that happens to you about 5 times a year where you just hear it for the first few times, like I gotta have this in my vinyl collection.
Well, usually it takes me like a day to like mull it over and go like, okay, yeah, that was a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'll
but
buy
for this
this.
one, it's immediate.
Black Country New Road.
Yep, it's like it's their debut record actually.
Where are they from?
The UK.
I listened to a band that you guys might have heard of in the last few days from there, that's from London, that's getting a lot of notoriety. It's called Dry Cleaning. Have you listened to them?
No.
Cleaning.
Never heard of them.
Yeah, check them out. They've got some pretty cool songs. And then there's that band. There's a really cool artist from the West Country named Katie J. Pearson. She's badass. That band Shopping from the UK. Have you heard of them?
No.
Yeah, they're kind of good.
Lots of ing bands lately, I've noticed. Bands that end in ing.
Yeah, well, at least we got that instead of like, the monosyllabic era of bands. But how about you, Evan? Anything you bought in the last 6 months that you sort of dig that's new to you? Other than
recently, I've been really into Idols. They're from Bristol, England.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah,
that's really who I've been like vibing with mostly. So
they're fucking amazing live, dude. Yeah, I've seen there's like a thing. You can probably watch them on YouTube. Like the last time they played Glastonbury was pretty intense.
Where he cries after Danny Nadeko.
Yeah,
that's a really It kind of seems like just the England scene in general when it comes to rock bands and like the post-punk stuff right now is just phenomenal right now compared to like
they're ahead of us. Yeah, because we're all caught up in Phoebe Bridgers and her guitar. It was amazing, and there was like this, like I thought 5 years ago, like after like kind of Cat Power and Yeahs and like who were great, both great. There was like a 2 or 3 year period where I was like, well, there's a real dearth these days of like really sort of interesting women artists in underground rock, and then all of a sudden like we went from like 0 to 600. And it's kind of a shame too, because some of them are getting sort of lost in the shuffle. Have you guys ever listened to Cherry Glazer?
Yep.
Yeah, Clement.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, it's weird what's going on with them, because she's amazing, and I saw her play live, and I thought she sort of separated herself from the others in a lot of ways, because she kind of kicks ass. And what I've heard recently is sort of like a complete departure. I'm not sure I'm entirely with it, but I'll tell you a funny story. It's like I went out with her mother when she was a kid, and she's her mother Caitlin's a single mom, and Clementine from Cherry Glazer is the product of a one night stand, and the guy didn't want to have the baby, so Caitlin was going to kind of Juno style. You saw that movie Juno, right? She was going to put Clementine up for adoption, and then like right before she had Clementine, she decided to keep her. And then I met Caitlin about 1.5 years or 2 years after that, and the closest thing I've ever had to being a dad in my life was being Caitlin's boyfriend for like 2 years when Clementine was a toddler. And I'm not sure it's like she's the reason why I've never had children, but that kid just screamed like the entire time. So it's like it was no surprise to me that she turned out to be some sort of rock star. She got to be pretty huge there, but she's pretty cool. I don't know. Yeah, I think that, I'm in the UK since the beginning of rock and roll. I mean, just the production, the amount of, I was listening to a band that I've never really listened to very much called The Cleaners from Venus, who started in like the late 70s, 80, and the guy is like a pretty famous poet, has made like 25 albums, and it's an amazing body of work, and like he's basically completely unknown, so yeah, that's one great thing about the streaming services is you can access a catalog of an artist like that, whereas you couldn't, I mean, it's like people like diss them all the time. I guess like artists sort of complain that we get like 1/10 of 1/1,000,000th of a cent every single time somebody plays stereo. But keep in mind, like your experience with Black Country New Road, you might not have accessed that, and if you really dig it, you're going to buy the record. I mean, you're going to want to have the record. So I think it's like I think it gets overly criticized streaming by artists. Basically, I just think there's a lot of really kind of whiny people out there that are sort of lucky to be in a band in the first place that gains any notoriety. It's a complete pleasure, and anybody that complains about it, it's just, I think it's silly. That's all. I just think it's silly. That's all. Hey, how about Idols are cool. I mean, I should listen to them more, but like I know like the hits, I know like the 10 most recognizable song. How about you, Sam? Anything?
Yeah, I really like not new objectively, but like 16 horsepower. Ever heard out of Denver?
No.
Oh, they're really cool. Well, there's 16 horsepower. Then the lead singer has a newer band called Woven Hand.
So say it again. You're saying 1.5 or 1.6 horsepower?
1.6 horsepower. They had like 3 or 4 albums in like the late 90s, I think. And then he's been doing this other project called Woven Hand ever since.
WOVEN Hand?
Yeah. I don't even know how I'd categorize it. Like 16 horsepower was kind of like gothic punk alt country. Woven Hand is like kind of metalish now, but with like Eastern influences and just all sorts of weird stuff.
That's good. I love that
wild
stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'll definitely check that out. What about you, Javan? What's Javan doing? Making himself a cocktail over there? He head to the old personal bar. I like the way Sam sits in front of a bookshelf.
my standard Zoom background.
Yeah. Makes you look very well read.
Oh yeah.
It's like if you were like a lawyer or like doctor on CNN right now, it'd be like, yeah, let's put the books behind me to make me seem like.
Well, have you ever seen I forget what it's called. There's a Twitter account that like critiques people's bookcases on their Zooms. Like it started sometime during the pandemic, but they like go through and like try and figure out whether they're like a poser, like whether they're like putting stuff in there to seem smart, or whether it's like their actual bookcase, that kind of stuff. So
isn't that weird? How fucking boring is that?
Right? Yeah.
It's kind of creepy too. Like I feel like if I see somebody on CNN, like, well, I mean ESPN, like there's that Mina Kimes who does a lot of NFL stuff, and she has a Steve Keen painting of Wowie Zowie behind her all the time.
Right.
I really appreciate that, and I reached out to her. She's cool, man. She was a huge Pavement fan in college, but like I can't make out any of your titles, but like. Looks like you've done some studying of history along the lines. Would be my guess.
Yeah. I'm a classics guy, so I do like Greek and Latin and stuff. And
yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're smarter than all the fucking rest of us, aren't you, mate? You know what I mean? So like, there's 5 of us here. You're definitely the brains of the outfit, aren't you, Sam? First of all, you have the most impressive glasses.
Oh, thank you. Have you guys used Warby Parker ever? Or an online thing?
No, I've seen that.
I've been thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I was in the, what do you call it? The optometrist, and like, I was just in one of those situations with a salesman that like picked out these overpriced frames for me, and they really are one of the most expensive things I own. I think they cost like $400, and I've had them for years now, and I rarely have had anything that expensive in my life. So
yeah, those are nice.
I take really good care of them. They're not really nice looking. I just don't want them to break, because I got to go back in there again and kind of drop a $600 thing of frames on me, But I figure once I bought them, I'm not getting new frames until I'm 60. Shit, I've got a ways to go. But Anyway, Javan, how about you, man? You have some
Uh,
tunes?
Right before we got on the call with you, I was telling these guys about this record that came out last month by Cheek Face. Have you ever heard of them?
No. Where are they from?
I think they're from LA. Very, from what I can hear, lots of Pavement influence. So I'd be interested to hear what you think about them.
I mean, what's a band that's like the most famous? Their name escapes me. I've got a couple of the records. I only listened to them a few times, but the band from the last 10 years, it's like had the most success at being sort of connected to Pavement. I have to flip through. What are they called? It'll come to me like probably right when I get off the phone. But there's some band that's like kind of updated. I don't know. I just think it's a really tough, in a lot of cases, very unfair thing for bands. I just think it's really lazy music journalism to say that people sound too much like Pavement, unless they really do. I mean, like, so, I mean, yeah, sometimes I'll hear things like, there's a guy, we used to have a great little rock club in this town that didn't survive the pandemic, and the guy who booked it would like email me like twice a year and be like, hey, this band wants to play here, you know, like, how about this? And it would sound like kind of like paint by numbers Pavement. And there were bands like back in the 90s that sounded way too much like Pavement for their own good. But then there are other bands that there are other bands, dozens of bands that I've seen like a review with like Pavement dropped in the review, and then I listen to it and it doesn't sound anything like Pavement. So I just think it's like, and you can do that I just think like, okay, you know, it's like saying a band sounds like Sebadoh or a band sounds like Sonic Youth. Like, so if you've got like distorted guitars, you sound like Sonic Youth. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, yeah, they sound like, you know, as somebody who's like melancholy and who like, you know, has a dude with a good singing voice, they like automatically sound like Elliott Smith. I don't know. It's like, you know, Cheek Face would have to sound. I think the band that I'm talking about, I can't really remember. For some reason, it escapes me. I bought two of their fucking records, and I listened to them a couple of times because I just didn't really dig them.
Is it Parquet Courts?
Yeah, Parquet Courts. That's it. Yeah, they sort of have been like the most successful Pavement band of the last decade. And I don't think they're bad. And, you know, again, like, I mean, you know, who am I to judge? I think they're good, actually. I just don't think they're great, you know? So it's like you're talking about, like, you know, you listen to this record and review this record and you're just like, God, I got to have this in my collection. I'm sort of coming from more of the approach like, oh man, I thought this was going to be better than it actually is. And then like, you know, I have done quite a bit of live DJing with two turntables over the last 10 years. And you sort of find out that's a whole different dimension of playing music. Is like, I don't really care if people are familiar with the music. But it is like a certain test if you're willing to play it. Of course, generally like 90% of what you're playing in a bar or a club or whatever is going to be music that most of the crowd hasn't heard before. So there's a certain amount of listenability, like, and some bands like just don't cut the mustard, which is another sort of test of like bands. Like, okay, like they sound great in the house and it's just me listening to them on the turntable, but like, you know, it doesn't work. And which is kind of good because like DJing actually sort of broadens your horizons when it comes to, I'm not saying more accessible stuff, but sort of stuff that sort of works in that manner, I guess. You know, who knows? But so yeah, and so Cheek Faces, where you said they're from LA.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, I feel like they remind me of Pavement in a way. It's like especially in the vocal delivery and kind of like the goofiness of it, which is one of the things that first drew me to Pavement.
Yeah,
Like,
you
it's
gotta
just
watch
very
like
kind of like
you gotta watch
silly
something
and
too much
goofy.
like Malcolm. Oh, it's good. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I think I get a bit. I don't know. I'll listen to him when we're done here and get back
Cool.
to you on that one. Yeah, I'll listen to all of this stuff, and I do a podcast, and I'm always and the guy I do it with is in Portland, and he's in one of those situations where he's like pre-divorced and the kids go back and forth. So like whenever she has the kids, he's all gung-ho to do podcasts because he doesn't have the kids. And like, you know, I don't know about you, but like, I've done two this week. I did one. There's a really good Canadian musician named Dave Schoonderbeek. Made a really good record called Let It Beak last year. And we had him on the other night. We have a guest like once every 10 episodes, and we just played all Canadian music, which was kind of interesting. Toronto's pretty hopping, seems like. But again, it goes all over the map. So the podcast, you guys should check that out. He's like, Mike's like the straight guy. He's like kind of a librarian. He kind of holds it all together. And like, usually we record really late at night, and I get a little anxious. So I generally have too much to drink, so I sound pretty inebriated during it. C'est la vie.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, you'll find it mildly entertaining. Don't listen to the first episode because the sound quality is so bad. But then we spent like whatever 150 on some mixer thing. So I think the 50th one is the Pavement one, and the 100th one is the Silver Jews one.
Oh, cool.
And then there's like a Minuteman one and a Tall Dwarfs one, and there's been some specials, but generally the premise is like he picks 3 bands and I pick 3 bands. You play 1 or 2 songs from each band, and my wife complains like that we talk too much. I can't imagine why. So.
Isn't that what podcasts are for?
Yeah.
I thought, yeah. I mean, believe me, like I do spend a certain amount of my time sitting in my chair saying to myself, man, play the fucking song, man. You know what I mean? It's like, what can you say? You know, like you only say so much about a song, you know. I guess some people write books about it and stuff.
Yeah, but what compares to just listening to it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just play the song. You know, like I always like it drives me crazy. Like when you listen to college radio and like the DJ would be like hi, and they'd play like 7 songs in a row, and then they forgot to. So you'd be like, oh fuck, what's that? And what's that? And like you'd be like, oh, there's like 2 of the 7 songs really great. And you wanted to know who it was, and like the DJ would come on, they'd be so high they wouldn't even tell you what they just played. You know what I mean? And then they'd call the radio station and say, hey, what'd you play like between like the Husker Du and the Feely song that sounded awesome or something? And they'd be like, I don't know. I didn't write it down. You know what I mean? Like, then they'd be like, you want to flip through and figure it out? And it's just like, just don't bother, you know. College radio used to be cool. So what are you guys doing tonight other than this? Oh, it's 10:15 there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do we
Yeah.
need?
I got work in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do for a job, like a real job? Do you guys all have real jobs?
I'm a music therapist.
Oh, that's good. What do you is guitar your main thing?
Yep.
That's cool. You've been playing since you were a kid?
I've been playing since I was 14. Yes.
That's plenty long. You know the chords
Yeah, so
and
about
everything?
12 years. Yep. And I got to tell you, the first band that I made when I was 16, the band name was actually a Pavement lyric reference.
Oh, that's cool.
We were Quasars in the Mist.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's cool. And you guys never made it?
No, actually, I went off to college. We played through the end of high school. I went off to college, and we actually just reformed right before COVID happened. We got back together again when I moved back to the area. So we're back together under a different name this time. We decided to change it up.
That's probably a good move, a good career move. What about you, Matt? Do you have a day job?
Work at Walmart.
That's cool. Like as a greeter or a stalker or what?
I do stocking 2 to 11 p.m.
That's a long shift.
Yeah, I'm not used to the sleep schedule yet.
Oh, so you go to work at 2, you said 2 a.m.?
It's 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. and I'm used to like morning to night or afternoon shifts. So starting that late and ending that late is just it's weird to me.
So you're in Walmart now.
Yeah,
it's cool. Like you can actually do like the show from this podcast from Walmart. Is that
no? I have off today.
I was gonna say that's like the employee lunchroom. Like that.
Oh no, that'd be cool if I could have a break long enough. I could interview you.
Yeah. How about you, Evan?
I'm currently unemployed.
Me too, man.
Hey, I just graduated from American University with my MA, and in an ideal world, I would be doing film stuff right now, but pandemic. So I've just been like doing small creative script writing stuff to just fill stuff out. Now.
And he's writing a book. He's writing a book.
That's it, I guess.
What are you writing about?
For my MA, I had to do a capstone. So I did a feature film script and it ended up being like 93 pages. Because they had like a weird rule where you couldn't go over 100 pages, which was kind of annoying. But that's on a film festival run right now. And it's going to wrap up at the end of the year. But what I ended up doing was just taking that script and then just turning it into like a novel format. And I did the first draft and it's rough, but I plan to like sit on it and then actually just keep working at it until it's actually readable.
Right. Well, it's good. Yeah, so you've got stuff on your plate. Yeah. There's no rush, mate. You know, as long as when you got a roof over your head, you're fine.
That's true.
What about you, Sam?
I'm finishing up a PhD, which I've been working at for like way too long. And I work at
that's what you said. You said that before, yeah.
Yeah.
So you sell weed or something? Like
no, I have a TA-ship as part of the PhD, and then I work close to selling weed. I work at a pizza place. You know, Wegmans actually started in Rochester.
Very famous.
Yeah. I work at the Wegmans.
It's all over the place now. There's Wegmans everywhere.
Yeah,
there's a Wegmans in Richmond. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh my
God. Great cold cuts.
Yeah.
Really nice cheeses. It's like the cool Whole Foods.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've got a friend that works at Whole Foods here in town. They pay well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Matt wants to graduate from Walmart. He probably enjoys the culture there. The summertime. In the summertime, you see some pretty amazing tats. Sure. Some really sexy patriotic clothing. One thing I've noticed about Walmart that's great is that they have, for really good prices, some really, really exotic products like jams and jellies and like really cool international goods that are way too sophisticated for the clientele. And so like you can get like, you know, like a really good like Dijon mustard that costs like $8 at Whole Foods for like $3.50 at Walmart. So I find myself in the food aisles a lot looking for specialty goods. Like they have really good jams and sauces. It's really incredibly international. And the produce is cheap. I just think Walmart gets a bad rap. Have you been to, you've obviously never been to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I've been there. It's like Walmart is so huge, it took like a part of the state of Arkansas, like not far from University of Arkansas, that used to just be like nothingness, and now it's like this highly sophisticated, like tri-city, like upper middle class part of Arkansas. It's bizarre.
Wow.
And it's all like they've got every chain store and chain restaurant that you can imagine has popped up there in the last 10 years. It's weird. Like, so you go from like total rural, like, believe me, Missouri sucks. Like, there's a reason why Josh Hawley's in the Senate. I mean, you drive through southern Missouri and like, I mean, fuck, there's like clear. I mean, you can just pull over to take a pee and you can see like swastikas in the restroom and stuff. So you cross the border into Arkansas and you're just like, whoa, it's like, you wouldn't expect. You were like, man, it's highly sophisticated here, you know. I bet you never knew that about Fayetteville, but they have, it's all because of Walmart. It's all because of Walmart. I love Walmart. Actually, I'm a Sam's Clubber.
Oh yeah.
I'm in the club, man, and that's kind of been like the biggest fun of the entire coronavirus for me because I'm a diabetic, so I've been like heavily locked down. So twice a month I go to Sam's Club. It's like going to like Busch Gardens or King's Dominion. It's like going to the theme park. I get really psyched. I get really like pumped. I call it with reverence. I call it Samuels. We're going to Samuels. And my gas there and everything. I love it. But anyways, guys,
using Samuels.
Yeah, just call it Samuels. Yeah, go to Samuels. Yeah, you're welcome to use any of my material.
Oh, thank you.
Well, anyways, yeah, give me a call anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm not doing a thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, let's hope that Pavement plays these shows in June. We're supposed to play in Barcelona and Porto. And I'd say it's looking pretty 50-50. I'm proud to say as an Iowan that we're 47th in the union in vaccine rollout. And we're 5th in the country in COVID death rate.
Oh my
in a bad way. Yeah. So it's what happens when you have a governor named Kim Reynolds. They call her COVID Kim Reynolds. And
she did that thing.
Appropriate name.
Yeah, she's basically permanently up Trump's skirt. Who knows, man? It's bad. It's bad out here. So at least you're not in Iowa. See, the thing I always tell my wife, like, don't tell people we live in Iowa. Tell people we live in Des Moines, because Des Moines is like the only liberal enclave in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's the kind of like Des Moines right in the center, and Des Moines is actually pretty cool. Like you guys would like it here because well, now maybe you'd be a little bored, but we'll see. Minneapolis is 3 hours away, and Casey's 2.5, and Omaha's 100 miles. So like you can go road trip to see pretty cool stuff. But it's the kind of state that you live in Des Moines, like you make sure you have enough gas in your tank so you don't have to stop in other parts of Iowa before you leave the state, sort of thing. There's a lot of crackers out there, man. A lot of white supremacist, highly armed white supremacist militia groups.
That is terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be so terrifying if we just disarm these motherfuckers, It'd be like neutering them. We need to emasculate them and take away their guns. Very aggressively. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys soon. Give me a call whenever you want.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Line her up, yeah. Thanks for your musical recommendations.
Hope you dig it.
And feel free to send me your emails, and I'll tell you what I think of these bands. I'm sort of most apprehensive about Cheek Face with the Pavement comparison, but anyways, yeah, talk to you soon. Here's our podcast. We have these stickers, 3 Songs Pod.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, and then today we put out we have a new album that came out today on the label. Actually, it's trying to get it. Over here, you can see all these piles of cardboard. So I pretend that I'm actually like shipping records on a regular basis. This is the new 12-inch by Martin Dosh from Minneapolis. He's a really sort of amazing dude. Here's the back.
Nice.
Martin Dosh, is that what you said?
Yeah, Dosh. Yeah, Dosh. You just go place the name of Dosh. You guys have heard of Andrew Bird, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the drummer for Andrew Bird. And he's like, he makes all the music himself. He's one of those guys that like, you think like 6 people are playing and you look up there and it's just Martin. And yeah, check it out, brokership.records.com. We put out some pretty cool shit. So
Hell yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
yeah, I'll cut you a deal if you want to buy anything.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Keep in touch,
Yeah.
gentlemen. Yeah.
Take it
Pleasure
easy, we'll
talking to
do.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You as
Yeah,
well.
Thank you.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. Take care, guys.
You too.
You too.